Welcome everyone. Going back to another update video here. Just listened to Kendrick Lamar's new album. That stuff was I love Kendrick Lamar. He's one of my favorite artists of all time. So I had to listen to that before I did this. But wanted to give you guys an update. Week 3 for the college football brackets just concluded last night. So updated that last video. That was actually a good last game that we had, Alabama and USC. Pretty unconventional one, but still a good one nonetheless. So if you guys want to check that out, feel free to. But I'm gonna go ahead and get started and get some updates going, so you guys kind of have that knowledge on what's going forward. I'm also wearing a Demaryius Thomas um, kind of sleeveless hoodie for you. So rest in peace to Demaryius Thomas, one of the greats, one of the Bronco greats for sure, and Georgia Tech alum. But we'll go ahead and get started. First conference. So notice I mentioned this in my update video, or not my update, like my introduction video rather. And I kind of mentioned a little bit, kind of like how the conferences that the names don't really mean anything. It's just more like just dividing the teams into like divisions, more or less conferences. I called them conference because it's college football, and I thought that'd be a good name to use, but um, they're more just to separate the teams. So when it comes playoff time, we kind of have that distinction, right? They can have their own in division championship playoffs, and then we'll have like the big playoffs at the end, right? So it's going to be more of a kind of a more of a way to kind of filter out teams. So we really get the better teams from each conference, better performing teams into the actual big championship that we'll have, the big playoff that we have. But starting off with what is known as the American Heritage Conference. Um, the big hitters right now, Texas Tech and Sam Houston, which is surprising, right? But Sam Houston has collected some really good games here. They beat Mississippi State in an upset, and then they beat Kennesaw State pretty readily. So, and then after that, then they beat Navy, right? Now, the Navy one is on the channel, so if you wanted to check out the game against Navy, we do have that on the channel. But the only one for week 3, I know I started uploading at week 3. The only one on this in this division that's not updated is the Mississippi State and Kennesaw State, which to be honest, not really that much of an interesting game, but I can show you guys kind of the stats I put in here. Blake Shapen threw for 4 touchdowns, and Davis Bryson didn't throw for anything, just interception. But that's kind of what we're looking at there. So again, nothing really much to really report, but Syracuse is kind of moving up on the list there at 1-1. They beat Jacksonville State, who's also at 1-1, so not to fret. The only teams who haven't won a game yet is Navy, Marshall, and Kennesaw State, right? So we're still looking on that. The cool thing is that in week 4, Kennesaw State and Navy are actually going to play, right? So one of them is going to have to win. So we're going to see who that is there. And then Marshall plays Texas Tech, looking to beat their undefeated season, right? Western Michigan is on a bye week this upcoming week, but they're 2-1 as of 3 games, right? They're able to beat Navy and they beat Marshall, but unfortunately lost to UTEP. So that's kind of what we're looking at. UTEP is also a big surpriser as well, um, as UTEP almost beat Texas Tech. That was one of my first videos that I dropped that really got some good viewership, right? So if you ever want to look at some of the older videos that I had released a couple months ago, those ones are in the playlist, right? On the tournament playlist and at the beginning, right? So if you wanted to check those out, feel free to kind of see what those are about. But that's kind of a little bit about the American Heritage Conference. Right now, Texas Tech and Sam Houston kind of have the lead. So we'll see. North Carolina still hasn't played um, 3 games yet. Some of them, I guess, North Carolina, Syracuse, and Jacksonville State have only played 2 games, right? So we're still trying to figure out what they're about, more or less. But Syracuse, North Carolina do play this upcoming week, right? So that'll be kind of cool to see what that looks like. But first game for college football that we'll see, Mississippi State, Jacksonville State. That'll be the first game. So we'll kind of see where that goes. And I'll show you guys, but I do have kind of the quarterback stats just to kind of see um, who should be up for MVP, right? If there's a running back that's consistently getting good, getting good stats, I'll put them on there. The trouble is that sometimes college football 25, they switch out a lot of the players, and they've been doing that with the quarterbacks as of late too with some of the teams. But I've been keeping track more of the quarterback stats. But if you want me to kind of keep more track of the running backs and wide receivers, things like that, I can also um, backtrack to that as well. But we'll kind of keep that in mind, and keep in mind I'll only do like the leaders, so only the running back leader of that game will get counted, and only the wide receiver leader, like the leader in yards, will have that. Simply because I just unfortunately I don't have a lot of the time right now to record all of the receivers and all of the running backs who carried the ball or caught the ball in that game. So yeah, I don't have time like that right now, but in the future, maybe I'll have the time to do that. But right now, I've only been doing quarterbacks, so we'll stick with that right now. Let me switch from American Heritage. Coastal Frontier Conference. That one right now, Memphis is 2-0. They're the only undefeated team left, right? So this has been a really competitive division, right? Really competitive. Florida State, Oklahoma, South Florida, LSU, and Northwestern are all 2-1, right? So that's been really cool to see. The only winless teams so far, Arizona State and West Virginia. Arizona State's been relatively close to winning, so I'm not too concerned about them. But West Virginia has been a little concerning, as they've kind of always played behind, it seems like. And they have another tough one against Florida State. So we'll see how that goes from there. But that's what we're looking like for this one. Not really too much to report on this, except once I go to the stats, like the QB stats, for like MVP voting, I'll tell you. And then feel free in the comments, let me know who you think um, is MVP of each division, right? So I'll kind of go over it. Right now, I think the leader for the MVP in this one, I think, is Seth Hennigan from Memphis. But I'll show that to you guys so you guys can see it firsthand. I won't go over too much of that right now. But some key games: Florida State beating Oklahoma. That was a really popular one that you guys liked. Watching that one, Florida State and Oklahoma. So I do appreciate the love on that one. LSU and Northwestern also. I think that was my first video to reach 90 views, so I appreciate that. But that one was a good one, as well as Northwestern was putting up a fight against LSU pretty much until LSU kind of pulled out in front. But that was something that was pretty cool to see. And some matchups that we have next week. I mean, Northwestern and Memphis play, right? Memphis is still trying to keep their undefeated season alive, but Northwestern is 2-1, so we can't count out Northwestern yet. LSU and South Florida, both have the same record, but you kind of have to wonder who has the edge there. And then Arizona State, Hawaii, we'll see who can take that one. That also could go either way. A lot of these games could go either way, except San Diego State being 1-2. We'll have to see how they do against Oklahoma, as Oklahoma has played relatively well. However, all of their games are within 3 points or less. So that is something to keep in mind, right? So that's kind of what we're looking at. Bowling Green does have their bye week, which, by the way, I will say for Bowling Green, even though they're 1-2, their quarterback has played really well, right? Their team has played well, even though, except maybe the South Florida game, but they beat Florida State, which was huge. And then, honestly, with this one, the quarterback has played well, but their defense really let them down against San Diego State. That was more of the big thing there, but because San Diego State has, I mean, it may not seem like, when you actually watch them on, in real life there, but in this simulation, they've been like their offense has been really good, right? Especially their running game. So if you ever want to check that out, I do have San Diego State and Bowling Green live on my channel, so you can feel free to check that one out as well. But moving on, we'll go on to the next conference here, to the Continental Athletic Conference. Looking at it, only undefeated teams left: Utah and Tulane, right? So that'll be interesting, right? And then we have some couple 2-1 teams: Nebraska, Boise State, and UNLV, right? So um, Colorado has their bye week upcoming this week, so we won't see Colorado. They had a disappointing loss, unfortunately, to Tulane. So they're starting off through their bye week at 1-2. Again, just more or less, they lost a crusher to Nebraska, which is ironic because they did that in real life too. Um, and then Iowa, they stomped. They just weren't able to really put it together too much against Tulane. Tulane kind of had their way throughout. But winless teams: Miami, Ohio, who actually came very close to beating UNLV, and UCLA, right? So they came pretty close. Iowa still hasn't managed to win a game yet. Um, they're just getting crushed by pretty much every team they face. So it's been kind of hard for them to get a win. But play Utah. That's an undefeated team that they hope to beat. So we're looking at that there. And then Georgia State hasn't won a game yet, and they play Nebraska. So we'll see where that goes from there. But I mean, more or less, UNLV has kind of gone through a lot of like those quarterback changes just because, college football, the 25, they do a little bit different with their quarterbacks. It's not always consistent to the actual starting quarterback. So some of these starters that you'll see in the games, they may not be the actual starters. I'm not going to change it too much. I'm just going to kind of let the game start who they want to start, let it go, right? If they end up starting somebody different, then they start somebody different. Um, and I'll update that in the description of the videos, right? So if you ever want to know if any of the quarterbacks ever, or if the teams ever switch their quarterbacks, I will put that in the description of the video, right? So that way you guys know ahead of time. All of the kind of like the log lines or the storylines for each game will be in the description, and I also will put the record of each team in the description as well. So feel free to check that stuff out. And then yeah, Georgia Tech coming out of their bye week as well. They went 1-1, split their games. So we'll have to see. They play Miami, Ohio, who's desperate to win a game. So that might be a kind of a low key good one. We'll see where that goes. But yeah, that's pretty much the Continental Athletic Conference. Utah's pretty much dominated, right? So they haven't had too much of a problem so far. Um, and yeah, most of that's been the running game though. So we'll have to see where that goes to. But that's where we're at right now for the Continental Athletic Conference. I'll go down more to the cross country conference, right? So cross country conference. Three undefeated teams left: Oregon, Ohio State, Indiana. Ironically, all Big Ten teams. Um, yeah, all Big Ten teams have gone undefeated in this. Um, yeah, some really good games too. I wanted to see if there was any that were popular. Arkansas State and Western Kentucky, surprisingly, I wasn't expecting it to be honest, but surprisingly, you guys really liked watching that. So that was cool to kind of see some unconventional teams that you wouldn't think get a lot of views, right? And that was kind of cool to see that. So Arkansas State definitely kind of looking to see if they can kind of muster some sort of comeback. They are at 1-2 right now, which surprisingly a lot of teams are at 1-2 right now in this. Kind of just shows a testament a little bit more of the competition underneath those Big Ten teams, right? But even with the Big Ten teams, like Indiana, they were really close to losing that game against San Jose State. I mean, they pulled away at the end, but that was something that was pretty close, right? So something to kind of look at as like a storyline. Western Kentucky is on a bye. So they split their first part before their bye week. They split 1-2. So, and then we're looking at some winless teams. San Jose State and FIU are looking to win, which FIU has Rutgers, who's 2-1. So we'll see where that goes. And then San Jose State has a challenge with Ohio State, right? So we'll see where that goes. Um, and yeah, so that's what we have right now. Arkansas State, Toledo. That might be an interesting one. Arkansas State is right below Toledo. So if they win against Toledo, they move right on up. So looking to see where that goes. But other than that, again, other than the top three, kind of anyone's game right now. And again, since it's early in the season, any of these top three teams could easily lose and bump down a significant amount, right? So this is kind of where we're at the fighting point for like who's going to get the top spot. Right now, Oregon's kind of that top dog right now, but we'll kind of see where they go from there. But that's more on the cross country conference. We can move on a little bit to, let's see, Gateway Conference. So some of these divisions have 12 teams. I think two of them have 12 teams, right? I think there's 12 total, 12 divisions total, and I think two of them have 12 teams. This is one of them, right? So the only difference is that 12 teams won't get bye weeks just because it's an even amount, and then 11 they do get bye weeks. And it's whatever at that point, but that's kind of what we're looking at right now. But undefeated teams right now for the Gateway Conference: Purdue, Kansas, Arizona. Those are the undefeated teams. I know you could probably looking at the Arizona Louisiana game saying like I don't see that on your video list. That's because my file got deleted. So I had recorded Arizona and Louisiana and then the file got deleted. Honestly, I was like, oh well about it just because Arizona and Louisiana wasn't all that interesting. Arizona pretty much controlled that game pretty much throughout. So yeah, that's what we have going on there. I will say Miami, Northern Illinois got a lot of views too. Miami Northern Illinois was a great game. Northern Illinois, I mean, there was a point there where I thought they were actually going to upset Miami, and that was going to be crazy. But instead, Northern Illinois is still searching for their first win at 0-3. They joined UConn and Louisiana as teams who haven't won quite yet. But I will say, for the longest time, until recently, my longest or like my most popular video on the channel was New Mexico State and Pittsburgh. And that was interesting because I like again, it's all you guys always watch the videos that I never expect you guys to watch. But New Mexico State and Pittsburgh was a matchup that I like would you never expect to really see, but it was kind of cool to see that New Mexico State always like they battled the entire way through and they ended up getting that game-winning field goal. That was awesome, right? Loved seeing that. I mean, just crazy numbers going on for New Mexico State. You hope that they can be like a dark horse that can go through in the playoffs. Again, all these teams will play in the playoffs since they are an even amount of teams. So, right, we can easily just divide them up in the playoff. That may not be the case for the 11 win ones, right? Depending on how the records shape out and stuff. I may have to do a kind of like a play-in playoff for the 10 and 11 seed for some of these. But for the 12 ones, they should be fine, right? You should be able to just go all 12 into the playoffs there for their division title rather before whoever wins the division title then goes on to um the actual division or the actual championship for all the divisions, right? So that's a little bit more about the Gateway Conference. Some upcoming games to look at. New Mexico State is playing Miami, so that'll be interesting because Miami almost got upset by Northern Illinois. So you'll see if New Mexico State's really able to pull something off. What else we got? UConn, App State, Kansas and Arizona, both undefeated teams. That's going to be the opener for this division. So somebody's got to lose there. So that'll be cool to see who it is. Kansas has played extremely well. I will say Kansas has played well. And Arizona, I mean, also, again, both teams crazy good in this simulation. So that's the only team that Miami's lost to is Arizona. So we'll have to see kind of where that goes from there. But that's the Gateway Conference. I'll move on to the Great Lakes Southern Conference. Let me get my water 1 second. Okay. So, Great Lakes Southern Conference, the longest name for a division, I will say. But this one has a little bit of intrigue. So we got Texas, Louisville, and Cincinnati are undefeated right now. A lot of winless teams in this one, right? So it's been a little bit more of an up and down. Um, and then you have some like Vanderbilt and Michigan who are 2-1. Wake Forest and Florida Atlantic had their bye weeks. They're each 1-1 apiece. And then Coastal Carolina, Liberty, Ball State, and Buffalo haven't won yet. So again, lots of up and down. So you have a lot of like the big name teams and a lot of the small brand teams for the FBS kind of in this division. That's kind of something that's a little bit unique here. But more some ones that I'd like to point out. Michigan and Ball State was pretty popular. Um, it was kind of funny with the Texas and Vanderbilt one. I had released that video maybe like a week before they actually played each other. And I was kind of intrigued to see, College Football 25 predicted a 38-30 Texas win. I mean, it came down to the final play. I think Vanderbilt threw a Hail Mary that almost converted. And the score was kind of similar. The Texas and Vanderbilt, that was kind of similar. So that was kind of cool to see that actually these simulations are actually they're like decently accurate. They're not like, of course, truth, right? Obviously, but it was kind of cool to see how accurate these simulations can actually be. So Ball State does have their bye week this week. They do have a lot to answer for. They do have 0-3 on their belt. So after losing to Cincinnati, they lost to Michigan and then they lost to Louisville. So to be fair, they've lost to two undefeated teams, but they have I don't know what it is, but the system has a defensive back starting your quarterback. He plays both defensive back and quarterback. I don't know. So I'm hoping that by the time we come here that they'll change that. But again, as I said, not really going to tamper with it. Not really going to do much with it. So if they end up starting Kyle Kelly, then that's who they start, right? Yeah, Kyle Kelly. Which I mean, he hasn't played like horrible. Like it's not like he hasn't played bad, but you know, you kind of want somebody other than a defensive back playing quarterback. So, but other games we'll see Vanderbilt, Louisville, that'll be a good one. Just because Vanderbilt's played some good football and Louisville's undefeated, so Vanderbilt could be the one that spoils for that there. For all my Texas Longhorns fans, you guys got Florida Atlantic, which Florida Atlantic hasn't really shown a whole lot, but as they did lose 21 to nothing against Michigan. So, and then um, they did have a good win against Coastal Carolina, but to be honest, Coastal Carolina hasn't really been the best either. So, kind of have to see. So Texas, again, don't want to over exaggerate Texas, but that game may or may not be interesting. We'll see. But other than that, a lot of these are kind of the same here. Wake Forest and Coastal Carolina just a game apart, so that'll be cool. Both of those have already had their bye weeks. And yeah, that's kind of what we're looking at here so far. Again, if you have any comments or anything like that, feel free to mention them in the comment section. I'll also post all that stuff on my Instagram as well. Feel free to follow the Instagram as well. Just dropped a new Instagram page just for this, right? So if you wanted to see it, just go to OC1 Tournaments on Instagram, look that up. You'll be able to find all of my polls, posts, stuff like that. I tried doing YouTube posts. Let me know if you want me to continue to do those. I've kind of slacked on them, but to be honest, I wanted to focus more on the Instagram polls because I'm able to use the photos that I have and make it a little bit more um, exciting, I guess I should say, because YouTube wasn't letting me use the pictures that I had, which was kind of weird, but we'll just go with that. But next division we'll go for the Great Plains Conference. So this one, the only two undefeated teams left are Virginia Tech and Baylor. Baylor had their bye week, so they kind of were saved by grace there. But they beat Texas State and Eastern Michigan. Virginia Tech's been on a dominant run, I will say. They've been on a dominant run. So that's been cool. I mean, they wiped Tulsa 47 to nothing. So Tulsa was undefeated coming into this, and they're not anymore. They got wiped. So that was pretty cool to see though. Virginia Tech, kind of one of the dark horse teams. I'll be interested to see how they do if they kind of when the playoffs come for this division, how they fare, right? Because that'll be cool to see. Winless teams are New Mexico and both the Washington schools, so Washington and Washington State. Um, Washington had this game against Eastern Michigan. If you haven't seen it, check it out. It's on the channel, but Eastern Michigan was able to come back and win against Washington. And then Washington State also almost beat Iowa State. That was something. Again, a lot of intrigue, a lot of mixture of conferences here, which I guess is why you can kind of see Virginia Tech kind of making a name for themselves because they could easily be one of the best teams in this division. Um, as the ACC, even though it's kind of interesting, the ACC shifts all the time, but you still see when a team is dominant, they're dominant for a while, right? So Virginia Tech's unfortunately, kind of fallen in that rut where they're a good team, but are they dominant, right? So that's kind of something that we're looking at there. But Louisiana Tech's been a good surprise. They've been winning some key games, including they had a game-winning field goal against Iowa State, so that was cool there. But there's a lot of cool things going on for this division, and it's right, everyone's all right up there. Baylor could easily lose, right? So, and then Virginia Tech, they've played well, but you want to know how long it lasts, right? So we'll see how long it lasts. But Washington does have their bye week as well. They do have to address a lot of things. They are 0-3, so they are going to have to turn it around pretty quickly, right? So that's kind of what we're looking at for the Great Plains Conference. A lot of cool things there. I'll move on. Let's see what we have. Great Plains. Okay, Heartland Elite Conference. Some of these names are so dumb, but I didn't even come up with them. I just put all these teams in like ChatGPT and I was like, come up with a conference name. And some of them I'm like, shoot, so some of them are bad. So my apologies. Again, as I said, not really too important the names are. They're just meant for like dividing the teams up into divisions, more or less. That's really all they're there for. But this one is interesting because Utah State while they had their bye week, so we didn't see Utah State in week three's worth of videos. Um, but Utah State is undefeated. They beat Auburn and they beat Army, right? The next one they have is Florida, right? Which Florida, that Florida and Tennessee game, that one was really good because they kept going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and somebody had to win, right? So, and then eventually Tennessee won the day. So it's very interesting. I'm really intrigued to see where that goes. Southern Miss as well has beat Houston and they beat Colorado State, right? Both of them by 3 points or less. So they've done really good stuff there. And then the only two undefeated teams left are Utah State and Tennessee. And both of them have had their bye weeks already, right? So they're not getting a break from here on out. They are going forward, right? Tennessee does play Southern Miss, which I'm intrigued to see. Southern Miss is 2-1. So Tennessee does have to be on their A game to make sure they don't lose that game. So we'll see where that goes. And then Utah State, the other undefeated team, plays Florida. That one will be a good one, right? So we'll see where that goes from there. Other ones, the winless teams right now, Colorado State and Auburn and Army are both winless, or all three are winless right now. So Army's playing Houston, which Houston actually has the number one quarterback right now as far as touchdown passes go in this conference with Donovan Smith. So that's been cool to see. What else do we have? See, Auburn. Auburn plays Michigan State. Michigan State's played pretty well too. So, again, some of these teams that don't normally play well in like the real college football, some of these teams are actually playing pretty good, right? So it's just a testament. This was my whole experiment to kind of see what if we shuffled up the conferences. Um, how would that play out? How would teams react, right? And some of them you still have those rivalries, like Florida Tennessee rivalry. I know Auburn's in there too, so you still have some SEC rivals in there. But then you also get some Big 12 action going on with Houston and Oklahoma State. You get some ACC love with Boston College, right? So it's been cool to see, right? And then also with like some Mountain West stuff in Colorado State, Sun Belt, Southern Miss, and then Michigan State, part of the Big Ten, right? So you get a little bit of all these different styles competing, right? And then Army, of course, right? The military style. So that's kind of something that's been interesting to see. We'll see where that goes. Also, I wanted to point out, notice how Colorado, Auburn, Army, and Army are all 0-3. I want to do this as like an example of if the season were to end right now, right? If I did three teams, the way that the 11 teams will work, or the 11 team conferences will work, Colorado State will be exempt from this, right? Because now we're talking about point differential. So we'll look at that. For it to be more of a competition, I'll put the 10 and 11 seed, just the 10 and 11 seed only, into a competition, right? Kind of more like a play-in. And it'll be like a play-in game, things like that. Whoever wins that game will take the 10 seed, and then we'll start doing the divisional playoffs, right? That's how I'll do it. Again, if you guys have a better, like kind of more better idea as the season goes along, I'm open to kind of change that. Feel free to kind of leave your idea in the comments, see what you guys have. I'll see what I end up doing. I may just end up, saying thanks for the idea, but still doing what I think is, just kind of want to see how it works. But if you guys present with an idea that I'm like, that actually might work, then I'll try to implement that, right? So again, we'll see how it goes, but that's kind of how I'm working with all the 11 team conferences. So that's the majority of them. So we'll kind of look to see with that there. But I'll move on to the other conference, National Horizon Conference. This one, um, this one's interesting. Again, I had a lot of fun recording these ones because we got Penn State and Notre Dame, undefeated teams. Now, Missouri, they're 1-1 because they've had their bye week already. Missouri and Notre Dame, that game was pivotal, I feel like. 3 weeks in, and already you had a very pivotal game. Notre Dame winning against Missouri now puts that tiebreaker for Notre Dame. Because if we're kind of predicting who's going to be competitors, you have to look at Penn State, you have to look at Notre Dame, and you have to look at Missouri, right? Other teams are kind of subject to change depending on how they perform. But those three, I feel like, are the instant favorites to come out of this division. So, with that being said, Notre Dame beating Missouri is pivotal for seeding purposes. Now, as far as the other games go, that Stanford California rivalry, again, I like the fact, again, completely random that I simulated these. I didn't even simulate with rivalries in mind. I didn't really do any of that. But the fact that Stanford and Cal kind of stayed together, UC Berkeley stayed together, that was cool because then we got to see that rivalry take place, right? So UC Berkeley does have their bye week. They do fall at 1-2 because Stanford was able to take the win at the end there. And then they do have their bye week, so they're moving there. I guess other ones that I want to point out. Can I just point out that Charlotte's played terrible? Can I just point that out? Sorry for all my University of Charlotte fans out there, if there are any. But geez, it's been rough. Georgia Southern absolutely had their way with them. Um, yeah, I mean it wasn't even close, really. I mean Georgia Southern dominated pretty much the entire game, and then they had, I mean, to be fair, they had Missouri and Penn State. What are you gonna do? And then this next week they have Notre Dame. So on the bright side, they're getting all these really tough teams out the way. But geez, they really had a rough schedule to begin with. So that was I mean, it's not funny, but sometimes, I mean, we'll look at the stats and you'll get a chuckle about it even more to see how their quarterbacks performed because, geez, man, it's been rough. But other games of note, Kentucky will be interesting. They play Penn State. Kentucky's 2-1, so they're looking to make that upset. If they do upset Penn State, that'd be kind of funny because then Kentucky then all of a sudden leaps into the conversation, which that will be interesting, right? An SEC team that is now getting another opportunity to not deal with all the other SEC teams. So that's cool, except maybe except Missouri, but Missouri and Kentucky sometimes get forgotten in the SEC realm. Sometimes I feel like so. Um, yeah, we'll see how that goes. But other surprises, Rice is coming off their bye week at 1-1. They play Missouri, who's also 1-1. So whoever wins that kind of moves up or moves down in the rankings, right? So that'll be cool. But other than that, that's kind of what we have for the National Horizon Conference. Let's see, National Horizon. The next one we have is the Pioneer League Conference. This one got a couple more undefeated teams here. So we have TCU, Duke, and BYU. Those are the undefeated teams. BYU, based on how they've played this year, not all that shocking. Duke had their bye week this past week, so they didn't play. So you haven't seen Duke yet on the channel. Um, so that'll be cool to see. But TCU and UTSA, that one came down to overtime. So if you want to watch that game, that one's on the channel, but did come down to overtime, and TCU did end up winning that game. So we have that. Let's see. Reno kind of had their way with Air Force. Air Force and UMass are the only winless teams right now. Um, as UMass, they were close. They ended up coming back against Central Michigan, but to be honest, Central Michigan had control most of that game, which Central Michigan's been a good surprise. They're at 2-1 right now. They're at 5. They play TCU, which is undefeated next week, so we'll see how that goes. And then Arkansas has their bye week. They've played relatively well. At 2-1, not bad. They didn't play all that well against UCF, which I will say, this UCF Arkansas game, most viewed game on the channel. So thank you all for the support on that. I'm really excited you guys enjoyed the UCF Arkansas. Can I just say as like a side note, love Arkansas's program. And I'm not entirely sure why. I just love their mascot, the Razorbacks. I think it's such a killer idea that nobody else uses, and I think it's a just it puts the unique stamp on Arkansas's program, and I just think it's really cool. I have a bunch of Arkansas gear that I wear a lot, so none of my parents or none of my family is even remotely connected to Arkansas or even the state for that matter. But just like the Arkansas program, I think they really do a good job with their uniqueness and things like that. But they did kind of get dismantled by UCF, so UCF did kind of have their way with that. So we'll see how that goes. Arkansas is gonna have to bounce back, but they have a bye week, so they can chill a little bit and see where to go from there. But that's kind of what is going on right now. Some other ones, UTSA and BYU, that might be interesting. UTSA is better, I feel like, than their record suggests. Um, they just have to kind of put it together. There were times like in this UMass game, I mean, they had complete control in the UMass game, right? That's what to say there. Now, They did get destroyed against Wyoming, so there is that. But I feel like again, there's a lot of intrigue for UTSA. Um, and I think other than that, still have to see what Central Michigan's about. Duke may be interesting because the fact that Duke's still undefeated and they play BYU the following week, that might be interesting, right? So we'll see where that goes with that. But other than that, still very close of a conference. Still have to see where that kind of falls together, but we'll kind of learn more within the next couple weeks where that goes for that. So that's the Pioneer League Conference. Got two more left, and then I'll go over the stats, and then we'll call it Southern Atlantic Conference. This one has a lot of undefeated teams. I will say it's very lopsided. And this one's pretty lopsided, I will say. But um, let's see. South Carolina, Texas A&M, Kansas State, and Maryland are all um, undefeated, right? They're all undefeated right now. So that's interesting. Now the winless teams, Troy, South Alabama, East Carolina, Ohio, right? So a lot of the low tier teams um, have been or haven't won a game yet. Then you got Fresno State, NC State, Clemson, and Minnesota are kind of in the middle there. Clemson's a team that could easily rise up, so we'll see where they go. But they do play Minnesota, which is the other 2-1 team. So as far as undefeated teams go, South Carolina plays East Carolina. Texas A&M plays Troy this upcoming week. This is another 12-team conference, so regardless of what happens, all these teams will be in their playoff respectfully. But we'll see kind of how that seeding goes from here. We do have two winless teams playing against each other, though, Ohio and South Alabama. So we'll see where that goes. But we have that. And then NC State is playing Kansas State. So honestly, not too much of like undefeated teams battling against each other. It's just more of kind of just more of the plot building week. So we'll see kind of where that goes. But that's what we have. Not too much on this conference, to be honest. Just, you know, teams continuing to do their thing. You could kind of see the separation happening with this conference already. Okay, we'll move on with this one. Okay, Southern Crossroads Conference. This one, I'd say, arguably has the most intrigue. And I say this for multiple reasons. The first one is a lot of the good teams, Alabama, Ole Miss, Georgia, they're all in one conference. Now, I didn't do that on purpose. I promise I didn't. That was mainly more of just like I randomly put teams in and they just ended up being the teams put together. So we're going to see a lot of rivalry games in this. So that'll be exciting. But on top of that, USC and SMU are both good programs as well that are kind of hanging around, right? So we'll see kind of where that goes. And then Akron, for some reasons, 1-1. So there's that. I don't expect that to last too long. But that's been cool. Some winless teams, Middle Tennessee, UAB, and UL Monroe, Louisiana Monroe. So, but I mean, again, Georgia kind of controlled Middle Tennessee the entire way. SMU almost lost to James Madison, which I would have been talking about SMU completely different had SMU lost to James Madison. So we'll see where that goes from there. Ole Miss, they controlled UAB throughout the entire way. UAB started coming back in like the third quarter, and then Ole Miss just shut them out in the fourth quarter. So that was pretty cool. And then Alabama, kind of same ordeal. Alabama pretty much had control the entire way through against USC, but then USC started coming back. I think more just because Alabama let the foot off the gas pedal a little bit. But Alabama does have their bye week, so we won't be seeing Alabama this upcoming week in week 4 as they were able to beat UL Monroe, UAB, and USC, right? So they have their bye week, but coming off the bye week, they do have the Alabama Georgia game. So that will be cool. So we do have that coming up. So stay tuned for that one once we get done with week 4. I'll kind of probably go over that in my week 4 update. So, but that's kind of what we're looking at for the standings right now. Now I'll kind of look to see, let's see. So here I have some of um the stats for kind of like I guess you could say more of like MVP stuff. Um Here, let me see here. I was trying to connect real quick. But looking more into that, Um, we got here. Let me see if I can exit this out real quick. There we go. Cool. All right. So I guess I'll go over the first one. You guys can look over this and kind of tell me who you think in your mind. It may not be the one on the top because I'm organizing them based off touchdown passes, and obviously touchdown passes don't signify the whole story, right? There could be somebody here, like we can go with Cade McConnell hasn't thrown an interception yet in 3 games, so we can go over that and say, 7 touchdowns, 0 interceptions is pretty beast. So that's been good to see for Cade McConnell. But Blake Shapen, again, 10 touchdown passes. Um, he's been playing lights out pretty much the entire time. Jace Bauer has almost 1,000 yards passing. So that's been cool. And then, but yeah, just kind of going down the line. Zion Turner, Max Johnson also haven't thrown um, interceptions yet, right? So that's been cool. Um, but yeah, lots of interesting stuff going on here. But yeah, let me know in the comments if you guys have like your guys' MVP picks for each one. What's really cool is at the end of this, like after the end of the season and stuff like that, I'll even put it like a mid-season one maybe where I'll kind of put like a poll on YouTube and even on Instagram on my Instagram channel or Instagram page, whatever you want to call it. And I'm gonna put like who are the midseason MVPs. I'll put like polls up. I'll put the top four. So because normally the top four are usually the ones who are playing the best anyway. So I'll kind of go over kind of who do you think should be MVP, and I'll go over that. I'll even put in other if you want to put in a shoe in, right? So we'll do that. But this is kind of what we're looking at right now for the first conference. Second one here, um, Seth Hennigan has not turned the ball over and has thrown 10 touchdowns, right? So he's been the premier MVP candidate. Even though he's played one less game than some of these other players, still 10 touchdowns, no interceptions is all amazing start, right? But honestly, none of these players are playing too bad right now. Garrett Nussmeier, while he is second right now with 9 touchdowns, he does have 5 interceptions, and a conference leading 5 interceptions. So we'll see how that changes, but he's been kind of on and off um, this whole year. So we'll see where that goes. Go on to the next one here. Ty Thompson has been the number one right now. He's tied in touchdown passes with Georgia Tech's Haynes King, but Haynes King's thrown for 2 more picks. We'll see. Shedeur Sanders is the conference leader in interceptions right now, but he's had 2 back-to-back good games, right? So he's been kind of on the upturn. That 5 interceptions was really more based off his first game against Nebraska, which was abysmal. So that's been something to see there. But top four right now, Ty Thompson, Haynes King, Malachi Nelson, and Dylan Raiola. What's interesting is that again, a lot of these will change. So even if they play well now, College Football 25 will change the rosters. Even if simulation they're playing good, they could change like that, right? So that is something to kind of keep in mind. UNLV already has 3 different quarterbacks on here, so we'll see where that goes and if that changes. But that's what we're looking at right now. So and that's the beauty of it. The top four right now won't be the top four in like even the next 2, 3 weeks. So that's something to keep in mind, right? So we do have that. Um, this one right now, North Texas Chandler Morris and Dylan Gabriel of Oregon are tied right now. The only reason why I have Chandler Morris at the front runner is because he's thrown for more passing yards and he's completed more passes and thrown for more passes, right? So he's gotten more of a sample size. You've gotten to see a little bit more. Chandler Morris has been playing lights out. But I mean, Toledo's Tucker Gleason, not a turnover yet, and he's right there, right? So something to kind of consider again. Um, Caden Veltkamp has thrown for 111 passes, which if you want to know what Western Kentucky's offensive style is, now you know. A lot of throw, a lot of passes, right? A lot of passes. So that's what they have there. 7 touchdowns, 5 interceptions so far. But that's kind of the big mention. Um, yeah, that's kind of what we're looking at right now for this one. Kind of the top four again. I'm keeping my eye on like Jalen Rayner, Rutgers quarterback. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that name. Sorry in advance. I don't want to butcher anything. Virginia, he'll be interesting to see if he can move up a little bit. But some of these 5 touchdown quarterbacks, if they're able to have some good games these next couple of weeks, could easily see them in the conversation up here, right? So we'll see where that goes. But now the Gateway Conference, looking at Jalen Daniels, he's been the top guy so far, but we do have 2 quarterbacks below him at Tyler Van Dyke and Cam Ward that have not turned the ball over yet. I mean, Cam Ward, I mean, top 5 prospect in the NFL draft right now. So makes sense why he's up there. But Purdue's played well, Hudson Card, Deuce Hogan, Joey Aguilar. And that's kind of something to mention. Arizona's quarterback, Noah Fifta, or I don't know how you say it, Fifita, I don't know. He's got 5 touchdowns, no interceptions there. Yeah, that's kind of what we're looking at. Pitt has had 2 separate quarterbacks play between Eli Holstein and Nate Yarnell. They keep switching them. So we'll see where that goes from there. But that's kind of what we're looking at right now for this. Jalen Daniels right now has the front card, but he's easily 1 game away with Tyler Van Dyke and Cam Ward could easily move up in those rankings, right? So that's kind of what we're looking at right now. The Great Lakes Southern Conference. Don't worry about that. I messed up. I'm trying to make a table there. But right now, Quinn Ewers is the premier MVP candidate. Now, he's kind of created a little bit of separation. Vanderbilt's Diego Pavia and Tyler Shaw have kind of moved a little bit. See, there's Kyle Kelly. He's thrown the most passes, most yards, but then also the most interceptions too. He's tied with Liberty and Buffalo for the most interceptions, but that's kind of what we're looking at right now for this one. First week they had Dylan Carter play at Vanderbilt, and then these past 2 weeks, Diego's taken over, and he's taken over in substantial level. This is him between 2 games, right? So he's third in the MVP voting between 3 games. So, or 2 games, I'm sorry. So he's been doing really well. Okay. Great Plains. Let's see. So the Great Plains, Iowa State's quarterback Rocco Becht, he's played pretty well, almost 1,000 yards, 11 touchdowns, 1 interception. Right below him, though, Kyron Drones, no turnovers yet, and at 8 touchdowns. Now, Washington State, 154 passes, by the way, passing attempts. Crazy, right? Crazy, but he ties with 4 interceptions with Jordan McLeod. So that's kind of what we're looking at there. But Louisiana Tech also had 2 quarterbacks between Jack Turner and Evan Bullock. So I think they're going with Evan Bullock through the rest of the season, but I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. But we'll see how that goes from there. But a lot of intrigue. DeQuan Finn hasn't played on the channel yet. So, but through 2 weeks, 6 touchdowns, 1 interception, good so far. So we'll see where that goes from there. But Will Rogers has played really well despite his team being 0-3. He's played really well. So that's been interesting to see as well that for some reason Washington can't seem to win games even when their quarterback is third right now in the MVP rankings. So that's interesting. Heartland Elite Conference. This is an interesting one because while Donovan Smith is the league or the division leader in touchdown passes, he's also the leader in interceptions thrown as well. So that's been interesting to kind of look at that. He is tied though with Southern Miss and Tennessee, Tennessee's quarterback also. But again, a lot of this is what makes the Heartland Elite Conference so interesting because a lot of the MVP candidates, like their teams are like in the middle of the pack, right? Because you have the undefeated teams, which are Tennessee and Utah State. Those are the 2 undefeated teams, and their quarterbacks are down here, right? So that's been kind of interesting to see that from that perspective. Um, and then Colorado State's quarterback, he's been good for the most part, thrown a lot of yards, a lot of passing attempts, but 4 interceptions. He'll have to tone that down a little bit. Right now, to be honest, if you want my honest opinion, the MVP, like real MVP candidate is Aiden Childs right now at Michigan State because he's only thrown 1 interception and has thrown 8 touchdowns, right? So he's really, I think, one of the front runners, but right now, Donovan Smith, statistically speaking, is the guy, but he's been also a little on and off. Okay, National Horizon Conference. This one's interesting. Not a lot of turnovers going on for Brock Vandergriff. 7 touchdowns, no interceptions. He's played great. Drew Aller is the MVP candidate so far. Grant Wilson at Old Dominion, he had a good first 2 weeks, but this past game, if you guys saw it, he was kind of struggling. All those 3 interceptions came in that one game. He had no turnovers up to that point. So, but here's Charlotte, the division leader in interceptions, goes to Max Brown. So, yep, that's been interesting. But a lot of this has also been a lot of QB changes. So Oregon State has had some QB changes. Georgia Southern's had some QB changes, right? So there's a couple going on there. But I mean, yeah, it was needed that Georgia Southern needed a QB change because Dexter Williams wasn't getting it done. So they put in JC French and he was a lot better and also gave Georgia Southern their first win. So that was cool. But yeah, other than that, Missouri and Notre Dame, I have a feeling this is how it's going to be. Missouri and Notre Dame are going to be really close. So we'll see where that goes. Um, and then, yeah, Oregon State, kind of hanging in there. Stanford's kind of on and off, but that's kind of more of what the quarterback play has been in this conference. It's been more of on and off play for the most part, except for Brock Vandagriff, who's been throwing lights out so far, and Drew Aller's also been throwing lights out. Okay, next conference. This one's interesting. So Malik Murphy has been crazy good this year. Again, had their bye week this past. So this is between 2 weeks. He's thrown on average 5 touchdowns each week. And so he's been crazy good with no turnovers. Reno's quarterback, Brendan Lewis, also 10 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. He's been putting in work there, but a lot of interceptions thrown between these quarterbacks. You have UMass's quarterback was the most interceptions, but he's also thrown 7 touchdowns too. So that's why he's four in the MVP voting. He probably won't get it in hindsight, but um, unless he turns it around and UMass turns it around, right? But we'll see. So that's kind of what we're looking at right now for this. BYU made a quarterback change. They benched Jerry Bohannon and they put in Jake Retzlaff, who's actually the actual. And then this is all in one game. So he threw 5 touchdowns, 4 interceptions in one game. Yep. If you haven't seen that video, that one's pretty popular as well. It's a more recent video, so feel free to check that out. But that was BYU for you guys there. Um, yeah, so that's kind of what we're looking at for this division. Okay, this one also interesting. Cade Klubnik, 9 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Max Brosmer from Minnesota is also right there. Lenora Sellers hasn't thrown a turnover yet, 7 touchdowns. So we'll see kind of where he goes from there. And then Maryland also hasn't made a mistake yet. Leader in interceptions right now, Jake Garcia. Um, kind of more at the bottom. They haven't done a whole lot. But honestly, other than that, a lot of these players have been pretty consistent doing their thing. The fact that Troy's quarterback is fourth in MVP candidacy is funny, but it's also great to see, right? To see that diversity of teams coming in. So that's what we have there. And then lastly, Southern Crossroads Conference. Right now, UAB's quarterback is number 1, which is funny, but that's the case. He's kind of got everybody beat by leaps and bounds. It's not really close right now, which is interesting because I think UAB is like 1-2. Like it's very interesting, but also a lot of quarterback changes. James Madison made a quarterback change, even though their quarterback was 5 touchdowns, no interceptions, and they put in Alonzo Barnett, who went 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. So he's played good. Temple had a quarterback change. They had Forrest Brock, who went 3 and 5, 3 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. They put in Evan Simon, who went 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. So that was an upgrade for them thus far. SMU also played started another quarterback. They started Preston Stone their first 2 weeks, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Then they went to Kevin Jennings, who has 4 touchdowns, 1 interception in one game, right? So he's done good stuff. And then Louisiana Monroe has started two quarterbacks rather, and that's kind of what we're looking at right now. Again, for some of these. I haven't updated all of them. Like for example, I still need to update. I think yeah, I still need to update USC and Alabama's. So Jalen Milroe, I think he threw 2 touchdowns, something like that. So he would move up a little bit up here. And then Miller Moss, I think he threw 3. So he would be like up here, right? So Miller Moss is going to try and propel his way up into the MVP candidacy early for this division here. But that's kind of the update for college football. Again, if you do have any questions, feel free to leave comments down on the video and, check it out. Share these updates with your friends, right? If your friends are also viewing these videos as well, feel free to kind of kind of see what the updates are. Check it out, right? So again, thank you guys for watching and I will catch you guys all later.